I alone level up chapter 16. Yes, I am one, but, please forgive me. This way, please. Let me guide you there. Sure. Sensing that his troubles might get more complicated if he said there's been a misunderstanding here, Jin-Woo decided to quietly follow the soldier's guidance for now. Jin-Woo then swept his gaze around his vicinity. Now that I see the surrounding atmosphere felt rather suspicious. The streets were totally deserted. The only people he could see were the soldiers and the members of the police. Also, corpses belonging to monsters, destroyed cars, and buildings with cracks running up their walls. Jin-Woo realized what had happened here. A gate must have opened up nearby. Something like that almost never happened nowadays with the well-established hunter system in place, but sometimes a gate would appear in a remote area, and it'd go unnoticed for a while. As a result, no one would come around to close it in time. When such an event unfolded, soldiers from the nearby bases were dispatched in order to buy some time until hunters could arrive on the scene. Of course, the weapons of soldiers didn't work against the monsters. However, in order to facilitate the evacuation of civilians, someone had to be offered up as sacrifices. In other words, they were to become cannon fodder. A role someone had no choice but to perform had been saddled on the shoulders of this nation's youths. Thank you. The soldier walking up ahead thanked Jin-Woo out of the blue. Pardon me. Latest update on meownovel.com. Well, because hunters such as yourself fight hard, we are able to go home at the end of the day, you see. He said thanks. That was something Jin-Woo wanted to say to the soldier. Instead, soldiers to the hunters and hunters to soldiers. As befitting those fighting to protect someone, or even something, they were expressing their gratitude against each other. Beep. The soldier's expression brightened after he received the radio transmission. I've received a word that the monsters in the vicinity have been dealt with, and only the biggest one remains. Jin-Woo nodded his head. He didn't need to hear the soldier's explanation to know. He could actually sense the presence of a powerful life form nearby, and he could even sense several auras of hunters surrounding it too. The enhanced perception stat was transmitting crucial information in the form of sensations and feelings, and that's how Jin-Woo got to figure it out almost immediately. That thing is the boss. Soon enough, the creature could be seen in the distance. In the empty, open space not too far from him, a dozen or so hunters were surrounding a giant made out of rock. It was as tall as a telephone pole. It was a golem-type monster. Hyok. The soldier spat out a gasp of fear as he took a step backwards. Perhaps it was his first time seeing one. Since the moment he saw it, his entire body had stiffened noticeably. But then again, most people would react in a similar fashion. The difference between seeing a monster for real and seeing it on a TV or a computer monitor was like heaven and earth. After all, meownovel.com is updating your favorite novel. Unlike him, Jin-Woo remained calm and observed the unfolding situation. Healers, concentrate your healing on the tanker. We're also doing our best. Why isn't it dying already? What are the damage dealers doing? It's not even remotely close enough to dying, is it? The monster's defenses are too strong, and we just don't have enough magic-type hunters in our group. Because they had been summoned out here in haste, none of them seemed to be high-ranked hunters. Both their defenses and attacks didn't look that effective at all. Because of that, hunters couldn't avoid being embroiled in the protracted battle of attrition. Boom. When the golem slammed its massive stone fist downward, the hunter acting as the tanker had no choice but to kneel down just for a brief second. Hyok. The tanker vomited out a mouthful of blood. And no, the tanker might die at this rate. What do you want me to do? My magic energy reserve is completely empty, you know. Hasn't the support from high-ranked hunters arrived yet? These hunters looked like they had reached their limit. Jin-Woo's gaze, as he took all of these in, gleamed quite sharply. If it's only that much, I can do this. Jin-Woo slowly took several steps back. This golem-type boss might possess the high defense, but its rank was probably lower than its scary outer appearance might suggest. You can read this novel at meownovel.com for better experience. Just from the aura it emitted, it was definitely weaker than the boss of the instant dungeon, the poison fang blue whatever. So, if I could just render its high defenses to nothing, what's needed right now was a powerful strike that could penetrate past that dumb rock giant's defenses. Jin-Woo got to enough distance away and took a position of throwing something. The muscles in the arm holding the broken sword began swelling up quite violently out of the blue. Thick pulsing veins even popped up on the back of his hand too. All of his physical strength was concentrated in his right arm. A short while after that, the arm pulled back taut like the string of a bow was shot forward at the speed of sound. Go! The view of the rank D hunter, Lee Han-soo, was turning dark. He couldn't continue on anymore. His prized shield had begun developing cracks as well. As if their magic energy had been depleted, the amount of healing magic hitting him from the healers had decreased quite noticeably. At this rate, every single one of them would die for sure. Lee Han-soo had to make a decision. Now, the only feasible plan here was for him to buy enough time so the other hunters could safely escape from here, and at a later time, hunters with higher ranks show up to kill this golem. Or, we all die together here. Cold sweat drops formed on Lee Han-soo's forehead. He finally firmed up his resolve. Lee Han-soo shouted out while looking back, "Leave this to me and you all gotta." It was at this moment that Lee Han-soo saw it. MeowNovel.com will be your favorite novel site. Something flew towards here as it gleamed coldly in the night air. Actually, he could only sense that he had seen something, but his eyes couldn't really pick up on anything tangible. It was that fast. Kwahang! That something slammed into the golem's head, and it grandly exploded. What the hell? Lee Han-soo's eyes opened up super wide. The headless golem began tottering dangerously. The hunters began roaring out in elation. Only then, they focused their attacks once more. It's working, our attacks are working. It's falling. A little bit more, just a bit more, and we'll win. It seemed that none of them had noticed the object flying in from somewhere, because they were too focused on attacking the monster, with the sole exception of Lee Han-soo standing right in front of the golem. That was Ruoer. In the end, the golem toppled over. Thud. The heavy body fell down to the ground and kicked up a mighty dust storm. Wah! Hunters all cried out in elation and celebrated their victory. We did it. We killed it. Latest update on MeowNovel.com. Only Lee Han-soo had seen everything unfold, and he slowly shook his head. No, our attacks didn't even work on this guy. Lee Han-soo hurriedly searched around the vicinity of the fallen golem. Just what did destroy the head of this rock giant? Lee Han-soo thought out aloud and searched around. Eventually, he discovered the remnants of a broken sword. Although there were some traces of magic energy within it, it was basically a cheap plain steel sword. What? Someone threw something this worthless and destroyed a boss-level golem, capable of brushing off the combined attacks of 10+ hunters. Suddenly, he forgot what he wanted to say. Lee Han-soo silently alternated his gaze between the corpse of the golem and the broken sword, before he ran past the cheering hunters, and in the direction the sword flew in from. Excuse me. He found a dazed soldier standing there. Pardon, you talking to me? That's right, you. When a hunter with a hulking physique hurriedly rushed towards him, the soldier couldn't help but swallow nervously with a stiff face. That was how great the pressure a hunter gave off to regular people. Lee Han-soo displayed the broken sword and asked, "Did you throw this?" "Oh, that? It's actually..." The soldier looked behind him only for his eyes to go round in surprise. But there was a hunter standing right behind me, though, of course, there was no one there now. While the flustered soldier was looking around the vicinity, Lee Han-soo scratched the back of his neck and stared at the broken sword. MeowNovel.com is updating your favorite novel. That power, that destructive power, could it have been a high-rank hunter? He'd never know, since the protagonist had disappeared already. Around the same time, Jin-Woo was on his way home. He turned around to leave as soon as the golem began teetering about. Indeed, he was the one who brought down the golem. He was well aware of this fact. Now originally, the loot and the profit arising from a dead monster belongs solely to the hunter who managed to kill it. If he wanted to, he could contest for the rights to the golem. However, it had become problematic when trying to prove that I am capable of bringing down a golem like that. Who would believe the notion of a giant golem crashing down because of an attack from a measly little ranky? He didn't even have a proper evidence to back him up to. Jin-Woo figured that neither the broken sword or the soldier standing beside him would be of a great help in that endeavor. And that would not be all. More importantly, he'd have to reveal the reason how his abilities had increased by so much that he could fell a golem like that. The harder he thought about it, he had more to lose than to gain. The one and only ability in the entire world to level up. He couldn't afford to slip up and reveal the existence of this unprecedented ability just for the sake of claiming the remains of a single golem. It's a bit of a waste, but can't be helped. Still, it wasn't as if he walked away completely empty-handed anyway. No, rather than that, he earned pretty big actually. The message he heard the moment that giant golem fell down. Level up. His level rose up by 1 because he had killed the golem. You can read this novel at meonovel.com for better experience. Indeed, my levels will rise if I hunt the monsters from the normal dungeons. He had learned some valuable information. That alone was worth it. An old and decrepit apartment located on the outskirts of the city. Jin-Woo's home was on the 8th floor of this building. I use the Commonwealth way of counting floors, so for all those who don't, it'd be the 9th floor for you. He found the key and entered the premises. It was dark inside. Jin-Ah's still studying hard. It was quite likely that his little sister was still in the library, studying. He found a bowl of rice and some soup on the dining table. Mom was in the hospital for a number of years now, and these dishes were from his little sister. The piece of paper, a memo from her, contained a bunch of cutely written words. Don't starve yourself. Imma check later if you ate them all. She must have prepared them even though she was busy as a bee. After he told her of his plans to leave the hospital earlier today, Jin-Woo grinned softly and settled down to eat. However, there was something he wanted to confirm first before doing that. Status window. Name: Seon Jin-Woo. Level: 18. Class: None. Title: Slaughterer of Wolves. HP: 2220. MP: 350. Tiredness: 2. Meownovel.com will be your favorite novel site. Stat: Strength: 48. Stamina: 27. Agility: 27. Intelligence: 27. Perception: 27. Available points to distribute: 0. Skills: Passive skills: Unknown LV, Max. Tenacity LV, 1. Active skills: Dash LV, 1. He thought that today had been a long one, and thanks to this long day, he was now level 18. His strength was approaching 50, and other stats also had increased significantly as well. He even figured out what the agility and perception stats did too. On top of this, add to the fact that I found a very useful dagger with good options and all that gold that I don't know how to use just yet. Then, even if he disregarded the special medicine he got, his conquest of the instant dungeon was a resounding success. Part 9, Geckos. Latest update on meownovel.com. A person stepping outside the house in the early hours of dawn would inevitably be cautious in their movements. Well, they might end up accidentally waking up their family members. After all, that was why Seong Jin-Ah was silently closing the front door to her home, so that her brother wouldn't wake up from his sleep as she was about to leave for school. But then, you going to school now? She was taken by surprise when a voice came from near her, and she quickly turned around to look, and she saw Jin-Woo jogging towards her. He was kitted out in tracksuit and sneakers. He had pulled the hood up high and looked as if he'd been on an early morning jog. Jin-Ah's eyes opened up real wide in shock. What the heck? Appa, you were up already? Yup, been a while since I was up, you know. Hey, have fun today and be careful on the road. Sure. Jin-Ah watched her brother's back as he entered the apartment and tilted her head. Now that is so strange. Appa actually woke up before I did. One would never call Jin-Woo a lazy type, but Jin-Ah was always the first one to start the day until now, simply because she was unusually industrious, which was quite unfitting for her age group. Now that I think about it, her older brother's back seemed broader than before, for some reason. No way that's true. A human's body wasn't made out of some rubber band, so how could it make any sense for him to expand and contract in a space of a few days? I've probably made a mistake. I alone level up chapter 17. Just as Jin-Ah shook her head, Jin-Woo suddenly pushed forward an umbrella to her. Why an umbrella? Jin-Ah received it and took a look at the sky. As it was still early dawn, the sky remained dark, but it seemed to be more or less clear and cloudless. But It doesn't look like it's going to rain, though. Take it anyway. But it's heavy, you know. Take it with you regardless. Besides, it's a folding type umbrella, so it doesn't even weigh anything. Stop exaggerating, will ya? Slam. Jin-Woo then closed the door. Chi, acting as he feels like. Jin-Ah lightly kicked the door a couple of times to express her disgruntlement, folded the umbrella and shoved it inside the empty space in her school bag and turned around to leave. Hang on. Her steps came to an abrupt halt after she remembered the difference in the eye levels between her and her brother. Something was rather odd. His eye level had definitely risen up higher compared to before. Do guys continue to grow taller even in their 20s? There was no way that could be true. Jin-Ah shook her head again and hurriedly walked towards her school. Click. Latest update on meownovel.com. Jin-Woo locked the door and summoned his inventory. Storage. Inventory. He discovered it through various experimentation and learned that the word used didn't matter as long they meant the same thing. It was the same story when accessing the mailbox. As long as the word spoken meant open, the desired effect took place without fail. TL. The author wrote open 3 times in Korean and in English in this sentence. Thus I had to change it somewhat. Jin-Woo then shoved the umbrella he just got from the random box inside the digital storage in front of his eyes. TL. This is the direct translation from the raw. I didn't make a mistake. This is what it really said. It's no good today again. 4 days had passed by since he cleared that instant dungeon. He always remained hopeful whenever he got to open up a random box, praying for another dungeon key to pop out. But unfortunately, he hadn't been lucky so far. It must have been a pretty rare item if it was this hard to get. Well, that's that, but now. Jin-Woo entered his room and sat on the edge of his bed. There was a matter he had resolved right away. Stats. Strength, 48. Stamina, 27. Agility, 27. Intelligence, 27. Perception, 27. meownovel.com is updating your favorite novel. Available points to distribute, 12. He had been saving up the stat points earned from the quests of the past 4 days. He made sure to complete the daily quest every day. Of course, he also didn't forget to always check his rewards too. However, he hadn't distributed the points until now. The issue was, this is tough. Indeed, he found it rather difficult to come to a decision. The strength stat, it was a wonderful stat, that's for sure. He hadn't regretted it once, investing all of his points into this one back when he started this thing. Agility, this was also a pretty darn good stat too. Against weak enemies, it only helped a little. But as the levels of his opponents rose up in the future, no doubt he'd be relying on this stat more and more. Well, the speed was a relative thing, after all. And then, stamina and perception. It'd be great if his stamina was high, obviously, and this perception turned out to be very useful as well. Finally, intelligence. This was the problem child. He hadn't been able to figure out this stat's uses yet. His level had increased by quite a lot, but he didn't feel any smarter than before. His memories didn't seem to have improved, nor did his ability to calculate quickly either. I think it has to be related to magic. This stat might be something he didn't really need for the time being, which left strength, stamina, agility and perception. Even then, this is really tough. You can read this novel at meownovel.com for better experience. Although he now had one less stat to choose from, he was still in a dilemma here. He didn't feel too confident at all. At least he understood that the synergy between strength and agility was very good. Even if he could deal big damage, it would be meaningless if he couldn't hit his target. On the flip side, even if he could hit accurately all the time, as long as he could not deal enough damage, it'd be a waste of time too. In that regard, one could say that strength and agility formed a set. Since my strength stat is so high, I should raise agility up to match it. If he decided to raise his agility stat, then he had to delay raising stamina instead. Well, the synergy between agility and stamina wasn't so good after all. The thing was, when agility was raised, the odds of getting struck by the enemy would decrease. But on the other hand, stamina was a stat that only displayed its true worth when the opponent actually damaged him. Of course, I do need at least the bare minimum of stamina. But raising both agility and stamina at the same time was a rather inefficient method. at least from his perspective. After a lengthy deliberation, he decided on the order of priority. The first one was agility, the second perception, finally, stamina. His strength was plenty high enough so he'd defer it for now, and as he was planning to raise his agility, perception took priority over stamina. After deciding so, Jin-Woo spent 2 points on strength. Tai ring, stat, strength, 50, stamina, 27, agility, 27, intelligence, 27, perception, 27. MeowNovel.com will be your favorite novel site. Available points to distribute, 10. Well, he wanted to raise strength to the round and even 50 for the time being. That was how normal human beings behaved. No. Then, he spent 8 points on agility. Stat, strength, 50. Stamina, 27. Agility, 35. Intelligence, 27. Perception, 27. Available points to distribute, 2. The reason for that was also not that special. He just wanted the last number to be a 5. It's far more preferable to see the numbers ending in increments of 5, strength 50, and agility 35. Seeing them end in the multiples of 5, he suddenly felt rather pleased with himself for no reason whatsoever. And as for the last 2 points, Jin-Woo invested them on perception next. With this, the points distribution had come to an end. Stat. Latest update on MeowNovel.com. Strength, 50. Stamina, 27, agility, 35, intelligence, 27, perception, 29, available points to distribute, 0. The only sticking point would be the fact that he couldn't quite bring perception up to 30. Well, I don't have any more points left, so it can't be helped, I guess. Other than that, everything was okay. He figured that it'd be fine to raise stamina and agility through leveling up. So then, I guess that's it. No matter who you were, you would be hard-pressed to feel 100% satisfied with everything. Since he had thought about his choices for a long while, he was more or less happy with them like this. It was then, he could hear the telephone ringing from the living room. Ringing. Is the association calling me? In the past, he didn't want to participate in the raids, so he did his best to ignore the calls until the last possible moment. But right now, he was raring to go and test out his raised abilities against various monsters. Jin-Woo quickly snatched up the receiver. This is the hunter Seong Jin-Woo. Aigu, you finally picked up the phone. Too bad, it wasn't a call from the association. A rueful sigh leaked out of his mouth. MeowNovel.com is updating your favorite novel. Learner Jin-Woo, why is it so difficult to get in touch with you lately? The voice coming from the speaker was a familiar one. It had been 4 years already since he graduated from high school, and therefore stopped being a learner, but the owner of the building always attached that prefix in front of Jin-Woo's name, ever since taking in both the Seong siblings when they were still young kids. I'm really sorry about that. I was admitted to the hospital because of an incident a few days ago. TSK. So that's what happened. I should have known. Well, there's that, and learner Jin-Woo, the rent for this month hadn't come in yet. So, what should I do? If it's a bit too tough for you, should I delay it for a month or 2? Oh, no, it's fine. I'll send the money in a bit later. Okay, but don't force yourself, you hear, trying to look after your mom and your younger sister. You're going through so much hardship there. I know money is important, but don't forget to take care of your body too. Thank you, I won't forget that. The call ended there. Jin-Woo pulled out the bank balance book from one of the drawers. The remaining amount in the account was only around 800,000 TL, just over $700. Phew. A groan leaked out from his mouth. After paying the rent of 500,000, he'd have 300,000 left for the month's living expenses. And the rent could be that low only because the apartment building was located on the remote outskirts of the city, as well as it being old and decrepit. Plus the owner of the building, taking into consideration Jin-Woo's troubles, and not raising the amount for the last couple of years, there was no way anyone would be able to find an apartment to rent for 500 grand per month nowadays. And trying to survive on 300 grand for the whole month was even tougher. I gotta make some money first. Jin-Woo decided to take care of the urgent matters first. He was no longer the same guy from a few days ago who couldn't even kill a single E-ranked monster and shiver in fear. You can read this novel at meownovel.com for better experience. How did hunters make money? The best way was to kill monsters. Hunters ranked S or A could get sponsorships, shoot commercials, make appearances in TV shows, and the like to hoover up a lot of money, as much as some Cheebles made, but their number was exceedingly few. TL. Cheebles equals owners of big corporations basically. Indeed, there were too few of them. Excluding those too few ones at the top, the majority of the hunters had to go to a dungeon in order to make money. The higher the rank, the greater the experience. The earnings would be decided by each individual's own capabilities. For someone like Jin-Woo, who was ranked E, worked only for the association, and had no experience in dungeons rated higher than C, such a condition was an incredibly tough one to overcome. Jin-Woo's expression scrunched up into something unsightly. Disregarding the conditions for now, if I could just enter an assault team, now that would be great. He took a look at the job postings on the Hunter website's bulletin boards and called a few numbers, but all of them turned out to be a waste of time. No one wanted to work with a hunter ranked E. Those hunters seeking outside help via job postings were freelancers almost all of the time, which meant that they were responsible for preserving their own necks. So understandably, they paid close attention when forming a raid team or letting someone into theirs. These people didn't possess enough abilities to enter big guilds, but their ranks were too high to work for the association. They were all kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place, but unable to go either way. Even then, these hunters still earn more than 10 million a month, as far as I know. TL. Around $8,830. It was the case of high risk, high reward. Since they put their lives on the line, the profit they earned was just as big at the end of the day. It wasn't for nothing that hunters were the targets of envy from the general populace. From Jin-Woo's perspective, he could only get impatient, though. MeowNovel.com will be your favorite novel site. Should I just take the rank reassignment test and increase my rank right away? Eventually, Jin-Woo shook his head. He knew that was a stupid thing to do. No matter how hard he thought about it, a hunter ranked E suddenly became a high-ranked one. Whether that was A or B, or maybe even C, it didn't matter. The reawakening would always become a hot topic of conversation. The masses loved nothing more than a good gossip, and hunters just so happened to be a good subject to chew on. The old saying went that, if there were 5 mouths then there would be 10 eyes, meaning the more people talked about you, the more eyes would be focused on you. His stats would continue to rise up in the future, so it'd be only a matter of time before his special constitution was discovered by the others. A hunter who can raise his abilities up higher, he becomes stronger as time goes by. Who is this hunter? How can he do something like that? What should we do to become like him? Without a doubt, many people would express their interest. After all, there hadn't been a hunter like him before. And among those expressing interest, there would be those who try to use him, or reveal their hostile intentions towards him as well. If just one of those possesses incredible power, then, just imagining it gave him the chills. He was far too weak as he was now, until he possessed enough power to protect himself. He didn't want the world to know of his existence, meaning, taking the test to reassign his ranks was out of the question. But, I still need to make money here. However, that didn't mean he could go out and get a part-time job, either. He didn't know when the association would call him for a raid. Latest update on MeowNovel.com. By raiding a dungeon, he'd get to earn both money and experience. So how could he blow that important chance? Just to scrounge up a few bucks by working in a local store. While he was seriously deliberating on what he needed to do, he spotted something in the bulletin board that caught his attention. Emergency. Searching for a single hunter, regardless of the rank, needs to come right away. Jin-Woo's eyes shot right open. This posting had popped up literally a second ago. When he hurriedly checked the contents of the posting, it wasn't too far from his home too. Jin-Woo quickly picked the phone up. The other side must have been in a hurry as well, because he answered the call even before the first ringtone. Hello. Jin-Woo stated his reasons for calling as precisely as possible and calmly waited for the answer. Oh, you are in E rank. The response from the other side was better than expected. It's fine. We just need someone to show up and fill up the head count. That is all. However, it's a gate ranked C, so it'd be hard for you to hunt there. So, we'll just split the profits among ourselves, and we just give you 2 million in cash. How about it? Can you come right away? 2 million for a day's work, TL, around $1,765. It was a lot of money for simply being there to make up the numbers. A rather tempting offer this was. It was regrettable that he couldn't get to share the dungeon's loot, but he might end up losing out on making 2 million, just by trying to be too greedy. For now, let's put out the urgent fires first. Such an opportunity wouldn't come around every day. After all, 2 million was enough for him and his sister's monthly living expenses. Jin-Woo said yes to the offer. I'll be there in less than 15 minutes. I alone level up chapter 18. Jin-Woo only needed 1 minute to get ready, quickly grabbed himself a taxi, and headed off to the meeting point. 9 people were already there, waiting for his arrival. The man who looked like the leader of the group waved his hand at Jin-Woo. Hey, over here. It was a bearded man with a fairly big physique. He smiled softly and walked closer while speaking to Jin-Woo. Are you Mr. Seong Jin-Woo? That's correct, Aigu. It's a relief that you found the right place so quickly. I guess this is fate. So how about we greet each other before we get started? The bearded man briefly introduced the members of his team. The 8 of them, including himself, were regular teammates that worked together all the time, while the remaining guy was someone who also came here to make up the numbers, just like Jin-Woo. Jin-Woo greeted other team members and studied their countenance carefully. Thanks to his enhanced perception stat, he was able to more or less sense everyone's capabilities. 5 with a similar rank, 4 with a slightly lower rank than them, 5 rank CS and around 4 with D or lower. There was a regulation when attempting to clear a gate rated C. The minimum number of a party had to be 10 hunters, and more than half had to be at least ranked C or higher. Only then did the association issue a permit. It seemed that them claiming to do all the hunting and he only needed to be there to make up the numbers didn't sound like an empty boasting after all. Now we're done with introductions, let me briefly explain the important points to remember. The bearded man introduced himself as Hwang Dong-seok, a tanker rated C. He displayed a relaxed atmosphere as if he possessed plenty of experience raiding dungeons. As he began describing the situations one had to keep an eye out for in the middle of a raid, someone came closer to Jin-Woo. Excuse me, looks like we're both pieces of fluff in this party. Huh? Latest update on meownovel.com. He was none other than the other hunter Hwang Dong-seok had brought along in order to fill up the numbers. He was a young man with a bright expression. However, unlike Jin-Woo, he was actually going to participate in battles. He was ranked D, so he had the right to do so. His name was Yu Jin-ho, age 22. Jin-Woo lightly nodded his head as Yu Jin-ho greeted him. Before shifting his gaze away, Yu Jin-ho seemingly wanted to carry on with the conversation, but ended up scratching the back of his head awkwardly. He soon returned to his spot. Hi Nim, let's stop here and go in already. TL. Hi Nim equals big brother, or a male addressing an older male, used more as an honorific by gangsters to address someone higher up in the hierarchy. Most of the time, anyways, we'll be the ones to kill them all. So what's the point of explaining it in detail like that? Right, my ears might get blocked up with wax at this rate. When the original team members all raised their voices, Hwang Dong-seok laughed jovially and clapped his hands. Alright, then, enough with the explanations, let's get going. Everyone got ready to enter the gate. Before we enter, you two, take a look at these. Hwang Dong-seok pushed forward a page of a document to Jin-Woo and Yu Jin-ho each. It turned out to be a simple contract. Write your names on the bottom and sign it, and we're good to go. The contents said, he'd not participate in any hunting, he'd not participate in sharing of the loot, and when the raid was over, he'd be paid 2 million won right away. The terms were the same as what he heard over the phone. However, they were not the ones to catch his attention. I have to promise not to question them, regardless of whatever incident happens inside the dungeon. Unlike the raids organized by the association, one would not be able to claim for compensation if something happened during a raid organized by the freelancers. One of the reasons why hunters couldn't get a life insurance either, one had to look after one's own neck. In other words, meownovel.com is updating your favorite novel. Only now did it feel real that Jin-Woo had entered an assault team. While confirming the clauses, Jin-Woo sneaked a glance at Yu Jin-ho's contract. As expected, his was different. Besides the promised 2 million, he was also going to share in the loot as well. Before signing the document, Jin-Woo asked Hwang Dong-seok, "What am I supposed to do when we're inside?" "Nothing too particular, just follow us and help us carry the luggage, that's all." "Your luggage?" Hwang Dong-seok pointed at the huge backpack one of his dongsings pulled out from the minivan. TL. A dongsing is a gender-neutral term to denote a younger sibling, can also be used as an honorific to denote a younger person. You'll be carrying around lunchboxes to eat when inside, several sets of clothing and equipment, first aid kits and some other stuff. Wait, first aid kits when entering a dungeon? Jin-Woo couldn't help but question this. You are not entering with a healer. I'm sure you already know that it's not easy to hire a healer. If you're running your own assault party, well, we've been doing things this way until now, so it'll be fine. Hwang Dong-seok smiled awkwardly. To think this team just barely met the required minimum number of hunters. One of the additional members mistook a raid as a blind date or something, and the composition of the assault team only happened to feature a tanker and damage dealers, and not one healer. Even after hearing that there was no healer present, that oblivious additional member didn't seem too bothered by the revelation. It was the sure proof that he was a newbie. Jin-Woo smirked inwardly. They are a bunch of wannabes. However, he still signed on the contract, not because he needed that 2 million, but because he knew very well that he could protect himself now. You can read this novel at meonovel.com for better experience. Here it is. I'm done too. Hwang Dong-seok confirmed the signatures of both men, and shouted out in a loud voice, as if he was feeling really pleased today. "Okay, let's get going, everyone." The party headed straight to the location of the gate. It was in the middle of the halted construction site for an apartment complex. The economy nowadays isn't so good, but still. Hwang Dong-seok clicked his tongue. Like large tombstones, unfinished apartment buildings stood still sporadically, imparting a certain sense of foreboding to all who looked at them. Could a cemetery of giants feel this way to observers? Did you know? Jin-Ho had walked closer to Jin-Woo and whispered softly that, while the employees and the investors are going through hell at the moment, the CEO of the project ran off to overseas 2 months ago, along with 900 billion. Jin-Woo gave the other guy plenty of hints, but it seemed like Jin-Ho didn't want to leave his site at all. Well, with the exception of Jin-Woo here, all 8 of them originally belonged to one team, so it'd be hard to get along with them that easily. "Hying, are you always this quiet?" TL. Hying here is slightly different from Hying Nim from earlier on, still means older brother, but without the tough guy connotation. Before anyone had noticed it, the honorific had become Hying. Jin-Woo couldn't ignore this kid anymore. meonovel.com will be your favorite novel site. Don't you know how to take the hint? Well, I've never lived while worrying about taking hints, so was this guy simply a good-natured, or just brainless? Jin-Woo wordlessly scratched the side of his head as he stared at Jin-Ho, and that bright smile of his. However, it was indeed true that Jin-Woo would get unusually nervous when he got nearer a gate, but it was par for the course, really. To other hunters, raids might come across as a legitimate source of income, but to Jin-Woo, each and every one he participated so far had been a desperate, bitter struggle to make ends meet. He'd get tense because of all the painful memories stuck forever in his head. "It's over here." Hwang Dong-seok's steps came to an end. "Oh." The hunters all let out a surprised gasp. "Hwang Hying, is this really a gate rated C? But isn't it too big? You think the association was lying to us? They said that investigators came around here twice already. A hole in the air, floating like a black hole. People took to calling it a gate. Its rank was assigned according to the waves of magical energy emission coming from inside. Folks from the association would stop by first to assign a rank to each one. After that, individuals or guilds wanting to clear the gate could follow the procedure and apply for a permit. Gates ranked A or B were, most of the time, left to the big guilds. Well, they were too difficult for freelancers to clear, after all. Latest update on meonovel.com. So, assault parties formed by freelancers took care of the gates ranked lower than that, which meant that a gate ranked C was effectively the hardest one for hunters not affiliated with anyone to clear. Hwang Dong-seok stood in front of the gate and looked back at his team. "I'll be entering first. Do your best to keep up, everyone." The tanker entered first, and the other hunters began entering one by one. "You never know, so." Jin-Woo lightly stretched himself just in case. Next to him, Jin-Ho began pulling out his own equipment from his bag. The sword and the shield coming out from his bag gleamed attractively under the light. Even a casual glance could tell that they were very expensive. They were definitely not something a newbie hunter could organize on his own. Hang on, he said that he never had to take hints before. So does that mean he's from a well-to-do family? Jin-Woo formed a surprised expression. Perhaps sensing Jin-Woo's gaze on him, Jin-Woo confidently and bravely stood in front. "Hying, you said that you're ranked E, right? Don't worry, I'll protect you. Just stick close by me." Jin-Woo scratched the back of his head. Just who would protect who? Okay, thanks for the sentiment. Let's go in as well. Regardless of how Jin-Woo felt, they still followed in afterwards and safely entered the gate. MeowNovel.com is updating your favorite novel. The interior of the dungeon was eerily quiet. Not only that, but it was also completely dark too. Huang Dongseok issued his first order. "Hey, Jiao Huan, I need a light." "Alright." The magic-related hunter Jiao Huan created a ball of a light in mid-air. The surroundings became bright immediately. Huang Dongseok lowered his shield and tilted his head slightly. "What the hell? Where are all the monsters? I wonder, there is no light in here either." Now normally, there should have been luminous stones found here and there inside cave-like dungeons, and emitted some light to illuminate the way forward. However, this dungeon didn't have those. Jin-Ho whispered to Jin-Woo from the side. "Hying, could there be a dungeon without monsters in it?" "Shush." Jin-Woo gestured the younger man to keep quiet, because Jin-Woo's ears were twitching. He could hear lots of footsteps coming from the distance. Jin-Woo spoke up. "It's not that there aren't any, they just haven't arrived yet. You can read this novel at meownovel.com for better experience." Jin-Ho swallowed nervously after hearing that. Rumble. Soon, the party could hear what Jin-Woo had heard earlier on. Only then did Huang Dongseok realize something was amiss here. A dungeon with no luminous stones could mean what moves around in groups, lives in darkness, and rushes towards a source of light. Oh, crap. The complexions of Huang Dongseok and his Dongsings became ashen all at the same time. "It's bugs. Bugs are coming. FCK it, man, why the hell did it have to be goddamn bugs?" Huang Dongseok cried out. "Get into your positions, they are coming." In front. From the other side of this lone passage, some things were madly rushing towards them in a large group. "Wait, could this be an anthill? Don't say something that might jinx us, okay?" Out of all the monster types, insects were the most troublesome to deal with. Their shells were quite hardy, they always moved around in large groups, and each individual possessed pretty high combat potential as well. And the worst of that lot just so happened to be the ant types. Countless hunters made a mistake and entered the anthills only to lose their lives very quickly. MeowNovel.com will be your favorite novel site. Rumble, rumble. The sounds of the insect legs rustling on the ground noisily reverberated throughout the cave. It meant that they had come pretty close now. Huang Dongseok raised his shield right up below his chin. However, they couldn't see any insects even then. His Dongsings began raising a fuss from behind him. "What's going on here? Why can't I see them?" "But they are close by, though." "Dongseok Hying, can you see anything out in front?" It was at this time that Jin-Woo shouted out. "Above you." "What?" Huang Dongseok reflexively looked up. Rumble. Huge insects were running towards them on the ceiling. If they were discovered late even for a single second, those things would have jumped down on top of their heads. When fighting against monsters such as these insect types that formed large groups, the breaking down of the team's formation would mean death for everyone involved. If those were discovered too late, then Huang Dongseok felt a chill run down his spine. The silver lining here was that he couldn't spot a single ant-like creature among the various insects. Latest update on meownovel.com. He raised his voice and shouted out, "Fire, fire, and bring them down once they are on the ground. I'll attract the aggro." Swish, pow, boom, keek, key. When a few monsters fell down after getting struck by the attacks of the hunters, the rest of them followed suit and landed back on the ground. Without a doubt, they were planning to engage the hunters. From here onwards, the capability of the tanker would prove to be crucial. Huang Dongseok activated his provocation skill to attract the gazes of all the monsters to himself. And, as if they had a prior agreement, monsters all turned their heads to glare at Huang Dong-seok at the same time. I'm over here, you DMN bugs. Kia. Dozens upon dozens of monsters rushed towards Huang Dong-seok's position. Slam clang, clang, cling clang. His shield managed to defend against the attacks of the bugs without fail. The strong jaws and claws couldn't tear the shield in half. The tanker Huang Dong-seok defended commendably well from the front, all stable and unmoving. Stand by, get in position, and get ready. Huang Dong-seok waited for the right timing. I alone level up chapter 19. Even when the bugs chomped and bit at him with terrifying intensity, Huang Dong-seok remained steadfast and waited for the chance to counterattack, to make sure that the aggro wouldn't deviate from him, even if the damage dealers landed a crippling blow to the enemies. This should be enough. With that thought, the real hunt had finally begun. To hunt, the real reason why the hunters were called hunters in the first place. Huang Dong-seok roared out, "Attack!" Along with that short but manly shout, all the accumulated firepower of the team poured out on the marauding insect horde. Keek, keek. The pained screams of the monsters rose up from here, there and everywhere. Jin-Woo stood at the back and observed this situation as it unfolded. That was the contractual obligation he had to adhere to for this raid. He inwardly simulated how he'd fight alone, as his eyes continued to take in the battle happening in front. How frustrating. Jin-Woo had to suppress his urges to rush out there several times already. He could see so many open gaps within the ranks of the monsters, and he also spotted the hunters missing those gaps and continued to commit simple errors. So, how could he not feel frustrated when he was not allowed to do anything and simply had to stand around? Even then, the damage to Huang Dong-seok's team proved to be surprisingly non-existent. It was all because their teamwork was rather excellent. It seemed that the relaxed demeanor of Huang Dong-seok before the raid began was not just for a show, after all. Latest update on meownovel.com. Jin-seok 11 o'clock. Hying, they are coming from your right too. Juntae, Seok-min. Jayo Hwan, take care of the right. Okay. Chil-jin, your wrist swollen up, retreat to the rear. Wang Hying, this ain't much to fret about. You wanna go back only after sweeping clean the entrance. We don't know how long this raid will take, so stop being hasty from the get-go. Control your pace, got that? Roger that. Perhaps because they've been working together for so long, they were able to communicate quite smoothly. Being able to communicate quickly like this would inevitably result in an excellent teamwork as well. It was a world apart from the ragtag bunch of hunters brought together by the association. What's more surprising is that this kid turns out to be pretty handy too. Jin-Woo's gaze shifted over to Yu Jin-ho next. When a monster bit into his shield, he kicked it away and swung his sword quickly at it. The expensive sword easily separated the monster's head from its body. For a newbie rank D hunter, he was defending himself admirably well. His kick-ass gear is filling up the hole left behind by his lack of skills and experience. Indeed. It was not for nothing that pretty much all hunters struggled hard to get themselves good equipment. When their gazes briefly met, Yu Jin-ho quickly raised his thumb up. meownovel.com is updating your favorite novel. Because of his expressions that looked as if he was desperately pleading for a positive response, Jin-Woo was left with no choice but to reciprocate the same gesture as well. Looking rather satisfied now, Yu Jin-Woo turned around. Kiik. Whatever the case may have been, the end of the battle was drawing nearer. Once the coast was more or less clear, Huang Dong-seok issued another order to his dongsings. Don't forget the magic crystals. We split them exactly 9 ways. Yep. This is my favorite part of the raid. Me too. Huang Dong-seok confirmed his giggling dongsings collecting the loot and walked closer to Jin-Woo. Aigo, we survived all thanks to you. Excuse me. Well, you were the first one to alert us about the monsters coming up from above, weren't you? How did you know, though? It was a gut feeling. Jin-Woo came up with a half-cooked story on the spot. Quite obviously, he couldn't come out and say that his perception stat was high, now could he? Oh, really? A gut feeling? Well, we got lucky today. I don't even want to imagine what might have happened if we didn't discover them in time. Woo. Huang Dong-seok patted his chest while speaking up. You can read this novel at meownovel.com for better experience. It was then, one of the hunters rummaging through the carcass of the insect gestured at Huang Dongxiak to come closer. Huang Haiying, please come over here for a sec. The Dongxings had all gathered in one spot, so Huang Dongxiak went there to join them as well. Something's a bit off about these crawlies. The hunters parted ways when Huang Dongxiak arrived, allowing the bearded man to squat down and take a look at the surroundings. He couldn't spot anything out of the ordinary, though, no matter where he looked, all he could see was the dead insects. What's off about these? Huang Dongxiak tilted his head. One of the Dongxings pointed at the leg of the insect monster closest to him. I'm pretty sure that wound didn't come from us. Huang Dongxiak's expression crumpled slightly. He took a closer look before raising his voice. Looks like something took a big bite out of it, doesn't it? Right? That's not the only one with wounds like that, you see. Looky here. This one, that one over there, and over there too. Looks like that one's missing a pair of wings as well. Could these creepy crawlies have been beaten down already before fighting us? Huang Dongxiak's expression hardened even more. Now he realized why the battle went off so smoothly, when compared to the number of the monsters they had to fight. Could it be that these things were fighting against something else? MeowNovel.com will be your favorite novel site. It was then, although it had been for the briefest of all brief moments, Jin-Woo still sensed the gazes of the several members of this team landing on him. Their eyes shifted away as soon as Jin-Woo displayed a hint of sensing them. With this, he was certain now, as I thought. His initial suspicions proved to be correct. Seeing that their teamwork was so good, they must have been fighting together for a long time already, and without anyone dying too. However, would such a thing be possible without a healer backing them up? No matter how good hunters were, they were still humans at the end of the day. Inevitably, they would slip up sooner or later. Well, only a short while ago, didn't their formation nearly break apart from the attacks of the bugs? A bigger picture finally formed inside Jin-Woo's head and a subtle smile formed on his lips. Maybe I can use them to my advantage, as long as they acted within his calculations, that was. Huang Dongxiak smiled and stood back up. Well, now, why don't we go in a little bit deeper? We might be able to clear this dungeon rather quickly if this keeps up. Huang Dongxiak deliberately spoke up with a loud voice. He didn't do that for the sake of his Dongxings. Well, the original members of the team were already surrounding him to begin with. In the meantime, Yu Jin-Ho smiled brightly and approached closer to Jin-Woo. Haiying, did you see it? You saw it, right? With this, I kicked some serious monster ass today, didn't I? Latest update on MeowNovel.com. Yu Jin-Ho swung the sword around in the air. Seeing this, Jin-Woo quietly asked him, hey, that sword and the shield, they are really expensive, right? Pardon. When I told my dad that I'd be participating in my first raid, he got them for me. Well, in that case, I think you should keep your wits about you too. Jin-Woo lightly patted Yu Jin-Ho on his shoulder, and followed after the other hunters walking deeper inside the dungeon. What is he talking about now? Out of the blue. Yu Jin-Ho tilted his head in confusion before chasing after the departing group. The cave seemed to go on forever. However, bizarrely enough, they hadn't come across a single monster as of yet. Since the dungeon was shaped like a long cavern, there was no way that they'd miss each other too. Could it be that the crawlies at the entrance were everything? No way. Now that would be really strange. Still, there should be a boss at the end, right? Without one, why would a gate remain open, then? The opinions of the hunters were shared among themselves as they roamed the expansive but empty interior of this big dungeon. Hold it. Huang Dongxiak in the lead suddenly stopped walking. He stopped so abruptly that people behind him ran into his back. MeowNovel.com is updating your favorite novel. The hunter whose nose had slammed into the head of the guy in front asked with a sullen expression. Ouch, what the heck? Huang Haiying, what is it? Jiao Huan, I need a light over there. Jiao Huan controlled the ball of light floating up in the air and redirected it further up ahead, exactly where Huang Dongxiak had been pointing at. Holy SHT, all these. All the hunters spat out low groans. The torn wings, legs, torsos, and even heads of the bugs, remains of the various dead bugs, were strewn about everywhere. As far as the light shone, the further into the cave the light got to, the greater the amount of the remains they could see, and also, a huge chamber located at the end of it all. That's the boss's room, someone muttered out softly. Huang Dongseok nodded his head. Everyone, get your equipment ready. The hunters quickly armed themselves. Nervousness was evident on the expressions of everyone present, with Huang Dongseok leading them in. The rest of the hunters cautiously and silently entered the boss's room. However, their silence only lasted for a few seconds afterwards. Jackpot! The hunter with a red nose cried out. He was none other than the guy whose nose slammed into someone's back of the head. Originally, it was forbidden to shout out too loudly inside a dungeon, because there was a possibility that a monster they didn't have to fight might hear the noise and run towards where the hunters were. However, none of the others scolded the red nose for his mistake. You can read this novel at meonovel.com for better experience. Whoa sirs, how much could all of these be? It is a real jackpot, innit? Everyone was way too busy gasping out in admiration and happiness. That was why. Wait a second. When Zhou Jiao Huan fixed the beam of light high up in the middle of the air, the situation within the room became clear for all to see, as well as the jewel-like stones jutting out from one of the walls of the cave. They are mana stones. The entire wall is made up of them. These mana stones reflected the light attractively, and caused the eyes of the hunters to sparkle brightly in greed as well. Mana stones. They were one of the treasures that could be found inside dungeons. Although each stone possessed a lower amount of magic energy compared to a magic crystal extracted from a monster, they almost always were found in large quantity, so if one were able to mine them, one could earn a substantial profit. Besides, the mana stone deposit they had discovered was incredibly large. The entire wall of the huge cave was actually filled up with these stones. Let's do a quick calculation. A hunter with a mathematical brain began moving his fingers in a hurry. If we can mine them all, we could be earning as much as 1 billion. Even if we split 9 ways, we're looking at a payout of over 100 million per head. Oh. Smiles formed on the faces of the hunters. Meownovel.com will be your favorite novel site. Jin-Ho had been staying at the back until then, and when he heard those words, he began poking Jin-Woo's side with his elbow. Hying, show me your copy of the contract. Why? Just trust me on this one. I'm pretty knowledgeable when it comes to law, you see. Jin-Woo shrugged his shoulders once and handed over the contract as requested. Jin-Ho walked over to Huang Dongseok while carrying that. Excuse me, seniors. I want to ask you about something. The eyes of the celebrating hunters immediately focused on Jin-Ho next. Jin-Ho flapped open Jin-Woo's contract and showed it to them. Mr. Leader, this is Jin-Woo Hying's contract. As you can see, there is no clause about splitting the treasure beside the magic crystals earned from the hunting itself. Everyone there caught on to what Jin-Ho was trying to say. It's customary to share the treasures or other rare items found in a dungeon, equally among all the participants of the raid. The splitting of the profit, in this case, is different from monopolizing the magic crystals of the monsters one hunted themselves. In other words, the mana stones had to be split 10 ways, not 9. The light within the hunter's eyes changed greatly, but Huang Dongseok simply smiled and took a step forward. Of course, we'll be sharing them equally. I know the rules well. We still have some things to take care of before that, though. Huang Dongseok raised his index finger and pointed to his front. Jin-Ho grandly flinched from that. He thought that he was the one being pointed at. Actually, he shuddered slightly and turned his head around to take a look, and finally spotted a spider as huge as a house quietly squatting way over there. Hyuk. Latest update on meownovel.com. Jin-Ho began taking hurried steps backwards and covered his mouth after seeing the spider's appearance. As if it was fast asleep, the huge spider didn't even budge an inch from the spot. Around the creature, there were empty shells of the dead insects piled up as high as a mountain. A fair few of them were half-eaten, and there were bodily fluids mixed in among them as well, basically resembling a trash pit full of food waste. That's the boss? Huh. Did that thing eat the bugs inside the dungeon? Well, it sure did eat a lot, didn't it? Hunters glared at the spider and passed their opinions one at a time. Huang Dongseok called the others to gather around. Jin-Woo and Jin-Ho, too, stood in front of Huang Dongseok as well. As you all know very well, as soon as the boss is killed, the gate will start closing up. So, before we kill the spider, let's mine the mana stones first. Everyone nodded their heads. Chiljin Did you bring along the equipment for the job? The man named Lee Cheol-jin shook his head. No. Who knew we'd find mana stones inside a C-rank dungeon? All the mining equipment is back in the van. Oh, come on now, dude. Didn't this Hying always tell you to keep it around just in case? My bad. I'm really sorry about this. Lee Cheol-jin grinned brightly and began apologizing to Hwang Dong-seok, the rest of his teammates, and even to Jin-Woo. Hwang Dong-seok spoke up while scratching the back of his head. Aigu, what a bother this has become. In that case, why don't you two stay here and wait? We'll go outside and fetch the equipment in the meantime. I alone level up chapter 20. When the hunters tried to leave all at the same time, Yu Jin-ho formed a confused expression and quickly asked them, "Are you telling me and Jin-Woo Hying to remain in the boss room?" Hwang Dong-seok smiled with his eyes and replied, "The Beastart is yet to wake up, even though we've been talking loudly for a while now, so I'm sure nothing's going to happen here. Well, there are some things I want to speak to my boys too, so we'll take a short smoke break as well, but don't worry, it won't take long." Jin-Woo listened to Hwang Dong-seok's rather detailed explanations and smirked inwardly. "You finally revealed your true colors. Huh, but all of you are leaving at the same time. Aren't you fools taking us way too lightly?" They were looking down on him because of his low rank, of course. As Jin-Woo expected in too, Hwang Dong-seok finally began to move. It was slightly different from the youth's expectation, though. It had been 4 years since he became a hunter. During that time, he had met many hunters. One of them was an Ijussi named Mr. O. He had retired from the life of a freelancer, but still showed up now and then to help out with the association's work. "Be careful of geckos," Mr. O used to say that rather often. When one participated in raids, one would inevitably encounter a dangerous situation. When such an event happened, some crooked, immoral hunters would try to sacrifice someone who had been fighting alongside them until then, with some flimsy pretext of them not being in the same team to begin with, or that the other party was simply weaker than they were. All just to buy themselves some time for their safe escape. It was exactly like a gecko cutting off its own tail and running away. Latest update on meownovel.com. Cutting its tail off. Mr. O took to calling those types of hunters geckos, and such actions as cutting off one's tail. The regulation stated that in order to enter a gate ranked C, the minimum number of participants had to be 10. Yet, Hwang Dong-seok's team only had 8 members. I'm sure you already know that it's not easy to hire a healer if you're running your own assault party. Well, we've been doing things this way until now, so it'll be fine. Indeed, he stuck to only 8 members, even though his team had entered countless gates ranked C. So much so that he could say this way until now. They obviously have no reason to fill the last 2 spots. They needed a tail that they could cut off at any given moment. After all, there was a reason why they were willing to accept anyone, whether it was a hunter ranked E or a newbie. And now, Hwang Dong-seok had decided to abandon both Seon Jin-Woo and Yu Jin-ho for a slightly different reason than usual. But it's a good thing for me. Jin-Woo had figured out Hwang Dong-seok's intentions pretty early on, but chose to say nothing. This was what he wanted actually. However, unlike Jin-Woo, who was full of confidence, Yu Jin-ho was quite different, as he only started his work as a hunter today. Yu Jin-ho spoke with a voice full of worries. "No, wait a minute, that is just, why don't we leave together?" It was then Jin-Woo spotted one of the hunters at the back raise his hand towards his hips, so he placed his hand on Yu Jin-ho's shoulder and spoke. "It'll be fine, we'll guard this place." meownovel.com is updating your favorite novel. The hunter's hand heading towards his waist stopped. Hying. Yu Jin-ho was quite surprised and confused, but Jin-Woo simply kept his mouth shut and lightly shook his head. Sure, the kid was noisy and got on his nerves just a tad, but Jin-Woo wasn't planning to let him die here. After all, didn't he try to get the fair share for Jin-Woo just now? Although that would have ultimately put him in a disadvantageous position. Hwang Dong-seok formed a smile as he looked at the 2 youths. "Our van isn't parked too far, so it shouldn't take long." Well, then, Hwang Dong-seok and his lackeys quickly escaped from the boss room, and their footsteps rapidly got further and further away. Yu Jin-ho turned around and demanded answers from Jin-Woo. "How could you say those things, Hying? What if that thing wakes up?" Without a doubt, He was quite scared of that spider. Looks like this kid hasn't grasped the situation quite yet. Jin-Woo inwardly clicked his tongue. It was too much of a bother to explain everything to. Instead of an answer, he began loosening his body once more. Around the same time, Hwang Dong-seok turned around towards the boss room. The hunters following him also came to a stop. They had arrived at a far enough spot from the boss room now. At this sort of distance, there was no danger of being overheard. Hwang Dong-seok smiled deeply and signaled to Jo Jae-hwan next to him with his chin. Hey, Jae-hwan, block up the entrance to the boss room. Should I blow it up? You can read this novel at meonovel.com for better experience. That's right, but don't block it up completely, okay? We gotta go in there a bit later too. Lee Cheol-jin then asked him, Hwang Hae-ing, is there a reason to beat around the bush like this? Why don't we just kill them now and get started right away? Hwang Dong-seok's expression crumpled and glared at the other guy. There was no need for him to maintain the fake smile now. At least that was one less thing to worry about. And my bad. Lee Cheol-jin averted his gaze in fear. Hwang Dong-seok sked. What if we start fighting there and the spider wakes up? How will you mine those mana stones and carry them out then? I'm sorry. Jo Jae-hwan butted in. Hwang Hae-ing, since we are on that subject, wouldn't that thing wake up while we try to mine the mana stones? If so, we might end up losing big, you know? That creature was strong enough to prey on those already scary insect-type monsters. If the team got sneak attacked in the middle of the mining operation, the losses they incur would be enormous. That is why. Hwang Dong-seok smirked deeply. We're trying to offer those two up as food, aren't we? Ah. Jo Jae-hwan nodded his head, as if he had finally understood the plan. Right now, no one knew just when the spider would wake up. It could be 10 hours from now, maybe 1 hour, or it could be a minute later. That was why they had to wake the spider up now and feed it. meonovel.com will be your favorite novel site. No matter how dull that monster happened to be, it'd still wake up from the impact strong enough to cause the entrance to cave in. Hwang Dong-seok continued on. We mine the mana stones when the spider goes back to sleep with a full belly. The permit they got from the association would last for 5 days. They still had over 4.5 days of leeway. In other words, they would wait, and if the spider didn't go back to sleep, they would simply dispose of it and mine as much as they could before the gate closed shut. They wouldn't be able to mine everything within the hour, but with Jin-Woo and Yoo Jin-ho no longer in the picture, they should be able to avoid losing out too much. Wouldn't that be far more preferable than working under the constant fear? Their safety was the #1 priority. After all, of course, that's the worst possible scenario. If they were lucky, the profit would be divided 8 ways. They mine all the mana stones and even monopolize the spider too. As an added bonus, those expensive-looking equipment on Yoo Jin-ho's body would become theirs too. That sword and the shield, they have to be worth at least a few 100 million won. They had nothing to lose from this transaction at all. The corners of Hwang Dong-seok's lips arched up. Block up the entrance, so we can go and take a smoke break. Quick. Yes, Hae-ing. Jo Jae-hwan replied as a blinding light began to gather on the tip of his fingers. Latest update on meonovel.com. Yoo Jin-ho's gaze was fixed on the sleeping spider. Even his breathing was cautious. He then asked, his expression rigid with fear, that spider be starred? It's not gonna suddenly wake up on us, right? Who knows? Jin-Woo remained economical with his words. He had more or less figured out what would happen next, but if he said out aloud his thoughts in full, then Yoo Jin-ho might faint from fear. Now that I think about it, those words were the first to come out from Yoo Jin-ho's mouth in the past 5 minutes or so. It seemed that he was really scared right now, and he used to be so talkative too. Then it happened. Kaboom! With a loud explosion, the entrance of the boss room suddenly caved in. Yoo Jin-ho hurriedly ran towards the entrance. Unfortunately for him, the entrance was completely blocked up by the fallen rocks. He pushed on with all his might, but not a single stone budged. Jin-Woo slowly walked over there in the meantime. Groa and Hae-ing, help me push this. Yoo Jin-ho was still giving his all to push the blockade of stones away. He said his name was Jo Jae-hwan. Before the explosion, there was a flash of light. A sorcerer ranked C that controlled light. This was no doubt that Beastard's handiwork. MeowNovel.com is updating your favorite novel. Jin-Woo placed his hand on the fallen rocks. If I want to, I can get out of here at any time. He could sense the weight of the stones through his hands. They weren't as heavy as they looked. When he very slightly pushed, he felt the wall tremble gently. Of course, he wasn't thinking of leaving at all anyways. Jin-Ho stopped pushing at the stones and cried out, as if he had finally figured out the truth. His face now reddened in fury. Jin-Ho shifted his gaze over to Jin-Woo. Those sons of bitches are trying to kill us. They don't want to share the mana stones, so they blocked the exit and let the spider devour us. Wow, you figured that out so quickly, Sherlock. Jin-Woo was rolling his eyes in his head, but still played along for the time being. Looks that way. This is troublesome. Hyuk. Suddenly, Jin-Ho's reddened complexion paled in an instant. Would that be the look of someone whose blood had gone cold? No need to ask him what happened. There the silhouette of the giant monster was oh so clearly reflected in Jin-Ho's eyes. Jin-Woo turned around. Kirurik. The spider's sleep had been interrupted by that loud explosion, and it was slowly raising its massive body up. The body the size of a house. Dozens upon dozens of eyes. You can read this novel at meownovel.com for better experience. That horrifying mouth? 8 long legs. Now that it had begun moving for real, it looked far more terrifying than when it was actually in a deep slumber. Jin-Ho leaked out a fearful gasp. His body had frozen stiff like a statue. On the other hand, Jin-Woo kept his sight firmly locked on the spider as he calmly summoned the poison fang of Kasaka from his inventory. You're mine. This was the perfect opportunity to test out his enhanced stats. The poison fang of Kasaka appeared in his right hand, swish, as if it had always been there. Jin-Woo gripped the dagger's hilt tightly. The reason why a hunter was called a hunter from this moment on was when the true hunt would begin. Hang on a second. However, Jin-Ho swiftly snatched up Jin-Woo's sleeve, just as the latter took a couple of steps towards the spider. Wah! What are you trying to do? Jin-Ho's hands were shaking pretty bad. Jin-Woo used his left thumb to point over his shoulder. Obviously, I'm going to hunt that. MeowNovel.com will be your favorite novel site. Jin-Woo had been following around Hwang Dong-seok's group until now for that purpose. In order to monopolize the remaining monsters in the dungeon, as soon as Hwang Dong-seok cut the tail and ran away, this was a splendid opportunity to swallow whole all the experience points and magic crystals. Well, only if the boss hadn't devoured every monster in this dungeon, that is. If that hadn't been the case, then he would have profited a lot more. Though, what a missed opportunity that was. However, Jin-Ho's facial expression clearly displayed his disbelief, as he had no idea about Jin-Woo's special constitution. What is this Hyang rambling on about? There was something he'd heard from someone somewhere before. A person would stop thinking rationally the moment he or she received a mental shock beyond their capability to deal with. The hunter ranked E standing right in front said that he'd hunt the boss of a C-rank dungeon. If this was not an act of irrationality, that what else could it be? Jin-Ho asked again, this time looking rather dumbfounded. Hyang, you want to hunt that thing, for real? Jin-Woo scratched the top of his head, looking somewhat troubled, before replying back with a question of his own. What, you want to hunt it, then? Part 10, Give and Take. Jin-Woo turned around even before Jin-Ho had the chance to respond. There was no need to listen to his reply, anyway. Even now, Jin-Ho was barely managing to stand up straight, as his legs continued to shudder. Latest update on meownovel.com. From the get-go, he didn't expect anything from Jin-Ho. Rather, he was relieved that the kid didn't follow after him, while saying he'd lend his aid or some such. He'll just get in my way anyway. Jin-Woo slowly approached the spider. The spider must have discovered the human's presence as well, as it was changing its direction towards them, while shuffling on its 8 legs. It was coming closer, as if it found the never-before-seen prey rather strange. The spider didn't immediately rush out, using its thick and long legs to push down on the ground. It inched closer and closer. Phew-woo. As that giant monster slowly filled up his entire view, Jin-Woo's breathing became heavy. His heart began thumping faster and faster too. Thump 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 thump. Jin-Woo controlled his wayward breathing and did his absolute best to calm himself down. He had to remain focused and steady here. He recalled the exact feelings he felt when he stood at the end of the second floor of the Hapjeong Station's instant dungeon. He then recalled seeing the poison-fanged blue Kasaka for the first time. However, this giant spider in front of him didn't emit as much pressure as that snake did, meaning he could definitely do this. From the get-go, if he thought that this boss was impossible to clear alone, he wouldn't even have stayed here. Kirurik. They had gotten close enough that his face was now reflecting rather clearly on those smooth, jet-black eyes of the spider. Jin-Woo's own eyes narrowed to a slit. I alone level up chapter 21. The exoskeleton looks pretty tough. Can my dagger even damage it? Quite obviously, a dagger would have a shorter reach than a steel longsword Jin-Woo used before. So, if he wanted to cause a deep wound, he needed to strengthen his attacks. Jin-Woo held the dagger in the reverse grip. He figured that it'd be easier to hurt the monster by holding the blade in this fashion. Kurik. Finally, the spider stood before Jin-Woo. Then, it raised its two front legs up and bent them at an angle. What is it trying to do? His curiosity lasted only for a brief moment. Jin-Woo's eyes shot open wide next. Slam. If he didn't instinctively tilt his body out of the way, the spider's legs would have penetrated his chest just now. The spider's legs stabbed into the ground behind him before rising up in the air, its joints folding back up, and from the ends of its legs pieces of the rocky ground fell. Jin-Woo sneaked a glance behind him. The stone floor now had a pretty substantial hole in it. If I got hit by that, it wouldn't have ended with me feeling a bit of ache in my chest. Huh. Jin-Woo's glare sharpened even more. Now was the time he needed to concentrate even harder. It's coming. Swish. The spider's legs that initially resembled bullets being fired, could now be captured in his eyes. Left. He ducked his head lower to evade the spider's left front leg. Right? He tilted his body back and let the spider's right leg brush past him, before he took a step closer. Latest update on meownovel.com. Right? He evaded the spider's leg that took aim at his head once more, and took 2 steps forward this time. Left, right, right, left, right, 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 left, left. Slam, boom, kwon, kaboom, slam, boom, kwon, kaboom. The spider's leg stabbed and destroyed the ground so loudly that his ears actually felt numb from the pain. Jin-Woo evaded the spider's attacks one by one, and got closer and closer to the monster. Meanwhile, Jin-Ho couldn't quite believe his own eyes. What the hell is up with this guy? Even though he was watching from afar, those attacks were so ferocious that all the hair on the back of his head was standing up. However, that man was evading them all while standing right in front of the monster, not to mention he was actually getting closer too. Seeing that efficient and calm movement, Jin-Woo felt a chill run down his backside. And he's supposed to be in E rank. There was no freaking way. If it was him standing there and not Seong Jin-Woo, then he'd be torn into a rag by now. He didn't have any confidence whatsoever to dodge those attacks even once. However, Jin-Woo was evading them without making a single mistake. An E rank doing something that a D rank hunter such as himself couldn't even dream of doing. There could only be one explanation for this. He is a fake registrant. Jin-Ho's expression hardened. Out of those highly talented hunters, there were a few who could freely control his or her magical energy. If they felt like it, they could easily fake the results and get a lower ranking. Hunters who got assigned lower ranks than what they should have got in the first place, simply by hiding a portion of their magic energy, such people were labeled as fake registrants. meownovel.com is updating your favorite novel, and perhaps more alarmingly, most of those fake registrants carried around rather sinister motives for doing so. Such as that serial killer whose hobby was to enter low-ranked dungeons and murder all the other lower-ranked hunters. As only those who were present knew what happened inside a dungeon, there was no better place to commit crimes than the world behind the gates. Jin-Ho nervously swallowed his saliva. Suddenly, Jin-Woo seemed far scarier than the spider. And just why did I have to insist on coming to this place? Jin-Ho felt like he'd break out in sobs at any moment now. Swish, swish, swish. In the meantime, the spider's attacks poured down without a break. Jin-Woo dodged all of those attacks and grew confident of his victory. Having decreased the distance between them little by little, the head of the spider was almost within his reach now. The attack pattern of the spider was rather simple, so he could get close to it pretty easily. For now, I'll aim for its eyes. It was the basics of all basic rules to attack the monster's weak points, so he decided to attack the eyes of the spider, which looked to be the weakest point in its defenses. As soon as I stabbed my dagger in those eyes, just as Jin-Woo made up his mind, he suddenly sensed that the spider's attacks had slowed down for some reason. Swish, swish. Was it because his eyes had adjusted fully to the speed of its attacks? Boom slam. No, that wasn't it. His eyes might have been misled, but his hearing could not be fooled. The loud noises coming from the exploding ground came to him a beat slower than before, since a few seconds ago, Jin-Woo was already pretty confident of his rather excellent sense of hearing, so he could feel this subtle change. You can read this novel at meonovel.com for better experience. It was then, a certain ominous premonition flickered past in his brain. When he took a closer look, the muscles around the vicinity of the spider's mouth were trembling quite imperceptibly. Why is it trying to open its mouth now? Jin-Woo had been getting ready to jump up 3 meters and reach the head of the spider, but he sensed something ominous was about to happen. Jin-Woo hurriedly changed the direction of his jump from forward to his rear, and then, splash, from the mouth of the spider, dirty and turbid liquid spewed out. Jin-Woo rolled on the floor for a second before regaining his balance. He quickly took a look behind him. The spot on the floor he had been standing only until a second ago was now emitting smoke as it got scorched black. Sizzle. Stones on the floor melted away powerlessly. Jin-Woo swallowed his saliva after seeing that. If I had jumped forward just now, it wouldn't have been only the floor that was melting right now. Perhaps sensing that Jin-Woo had been distracted, the spider rushed towards him in no time. Rustle. Jin-Woo raised his head. By then, the spider was already right in front of his eyes. Swish. Jin-Woo jumped up to evade the giant spider's legs. Slam. The beastard's attacks had recommenced. DMN it. meonovel.com will be your favorite novel site. After that, Jin-Woo got near the monster's head several times more. Every time he did that, though, he had no choice but to retreat in order to evade that disgusting digestive juice. When the spider's attack pattern had become two, it became that much harder to deal with it. If he got closer after evading all those snapping legs, the digestive juice spewed out. Its legs attacked again once he had to retreat to a distance because of the juices. SHT. Feeling frustrated now, he decided to attack the legs with his dagger. Unfortunately, the legs were also covered in that thick exoskeleton, and no matter how many times he cut it, he couldn't even nick it once. Jin-Woo bit his lower lip. This isn't going to work. The spider only needed its 2 front legs to attack him, but on the other hand, he needed to use his entire body to evade them. It was obvious who would tire out first here. Tiredness. 57. As he thought, his tiredness stat was rapidly rising up. When this stat hit 70, his speed would decrease, and when it reaches 90, his breathing would become too heavy, and it'd become that much harder to freely move about. He was running out of time. If I want to get closer to it, then speed. His speed was the issue. Boom boom boom, boom. Wait, speed, is it? As Jin-Woo continued to barely evade each of the legs raining down, a thought entered his head. Yeah, I had that, didn't I? He indeed possessed a single active skill. He had forgotten all about it because there was no need for him to use it until now. Latest update on meonovel.com. You've activated skill. Your movement speed is increased by 30%. 1 mana will be spent every minute during its activation. Along with those messages, Jin-Woo's body became even faster as if a booster had been activated. Evading the spider's legs had become even easier as a result. Swish, 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 boom, boom, boom. He swiftly evaded the spider legs slamming down like lightning bolts, and in the blink of an eye, arrived before the monster. Taken by surprise, the spider hurriedly spewed out its digestive juice. However, thanks to the increase in his speed, his movement had now this certain composure to it. Jin-Woo easily evaded the digestive juice and pounced towards the spider's head. Slash. His dagger slashed at the spider's eyes. Effect. Paralysis has been activated. The effect has been cancelled due to the high resistance of the target. Effect. Bleeding has been activated. The target's stamina will decrease by 1% per second. Yes. One of the two special effects the Poison Fang of Kasaka possessed had activated successfully. Roar! The spider roared out and staggered about. Jin-Woo didn't miss this opening. The moment his 2 feet landed back on the ground, he jumped up again and climbed on the spider's body to get to the top of its head. MeowNovel.com is updating your favorite novel. The spider went crazy and swung its legs all over the place, but Jin-Woo wasn't going to let those blind attacks land on him. Slam, boom, kaboom. Holes continued to appear on the poor, blameless ground instead. Now standing on top of the spider's head, Jin-Woo began stabbing the eyes of the spider with his dagger. Stab, 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 roar, stab, stab, roar. The spider rampaged around this way and that, but Jin-Woo endured till the end and continued to shove his dagger into the head of the spider. Kururuk. The spider began tottering about dangerously. It was obviously getting damaged now. Seeing this, Jin-Woo's hands picked up speed, and eventually, the huge body of the spider finally tilted to the side. Thud. However, Jin-Woo didn't stay his hand. No, he kept going at it until the spider was dead for sure. Stab, 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 kurik, kururu. Along with the final gasps from the spider, several messages popped up in his view. You've killed the owner of this dungeon. Level up, level up, level up. You can read this novel at meownovel.com for better experience. I did it. While covered from head to toe in the spider blood, Jin-Woo raised his hands up high. Maybe because it was a boss monster, his level jumped up by 3. Status window. Name: Seon Jin-Woo. Level: 21. Class: None. Title: None. HP: 2600. MP: 391. Tiredness: 0. Stat: Strength: 53. Stamina: 30. Agility: 38. Intelligence: 30. Perception: 32. Available points to distribute: 0. Skills: Passive skills: Unknown LV, Max. Tenacity LV, 1. MeowNovel.com will be your favorite novel site. Active skills: -LV, 1. From level 18, he had jumped up to reach 21 in one go, and that wasn't even the end. Besides the level up messages, something else also popped up as well. Tai Ring, store, buy function is now available with your level having reached 20. Oh, so I can finally spend those gold things now, eh? That was a nice message for sure. However, now wasn't the right time to relaxedly browse through the store. Rumble. The cave began to shake just a little. With the death of the dungeon's owner, the entrance of the dungeon will be destroyed in 1 hour. Remaining time, 59 minutes 58 seconds. Indeed, he had to get out of this place before the gate closed on him. After all, browsing through the store could be done once he was somewhere safe. Just as Jin-Woo was about to climb down, he spotted something gleaming brightly in the middle of the spider's head. Is that an item? However, unlike the monsters from the instant dungeon, there was no message about recovered items, nor could he automatically claim them. What could it be? Then, Jin-Woo pondered briefly before realizing what it was. Ah, these things have magic crystals, don't they? No matter how busy he was, how could he forget something so valuable like that? Jin-Woo extracted the magic crystal hidden deep inside the head of the dead spider. This was a C-rank magic crystal extracted from the boss monster, so it should at least go for around 10 million won easy. As the trophy for his glamorous victory, this would do very nicely. Latest update on meownovel.com. Jin-Woo lightly jumped down from the dead spider's head. Tap. He landed lightly on the ground and turned around, and well, he discovered more gleaming lights, this time coming from the spider's belly. Not only that, but several of them even. Jin-Woo was now feeling rather surprised. He heard stories of some monsters possessing 2, 3 magic crystals, but there were simply too many lights to say those could all be magic crystals. What could they be? Then, he used the dagger to slice open the belly and continued on to its stomach, which resulted in half-digested remains of the insect-type monsters to pour out to the ground. And the lights were coming from those. No way. Jin-Woo rummaged through the dead insects one at a time, and just as he suspected, They all possessed their magic crystals. Sure, a few of them had melted down and become smaller than before, but quite a lot of them had survived and remained as good as new. When he collected the intact ones, he counted over 10. I really hit the jackpot this time. He came to earn this month's rent. But at this rate, he'd be earning way more than that. Hying Nim. When Jin-Woo looked back, he saw Yu Jin-Ho there. Please put them in here. Yu Jin-Ho then proceeded to carefully tuck in the magic crystals belonging to Jin-Woo inside his equipment bag. Next, he reached inside the corner of the same bag and pulled out a thermos. Before pouring the flask's content on its lid, Hying Nim, you must be feeling thirsty. Please drink this. It's water. Indeed, it was a cold, refreshing cup of water, filled right up to the edge. Why is this kid doing something no one asked him to? I alone level up chapter 22. Since Jin-Woo was feeling thirsty anyway, he took the thermos lid to drink the water, but his head never stopped tilting in the meantime. Gulp, gulp. The water slid down his throat and refreshed him quite nicely. Hying Nim, did you enjoy it? Before he had noticed it, the honorific had changed to Hying Nim too. Yeah, it's refreshing. Jin-Woo spoke his earnest opinion and handed the lid over to Yu Jin-Ho. And the things you saw in here. Even before Jin-Woo could finish his sentence, Yu Jin-Ho quickly cut in, as if to say that there's nothing to worry about. Of course, I won't say anything to anyone and take this secret with me to my grave. No, hang on, no need to take it to your grave. But, of course, I will. It'll be a promise between Hying Nim and I, after all. Well, in that case, okay, if you say so, you don't have to worry about a thing, Hying Nim. It wasn't as if anyone would believe the claim that a rank E solid the boss of a rank C gate anyway. Still, the kid was saying he'd voluntarily keep his mouth shut, and that would certainly make his life a bit easier. I thought he didn't know how to take a hint, but he's pretty quick on the uptake on things like this. Hey, is there anything else you'd like to tell me, Hying Nim? No, not particularly. Latest update on meownovel.com. Well, that sounded a bit suspect there. Jin-Woo studied the overly polite mannerism of Yu Jin-Ho and inwardly questioned his motives, before coming to a conclusion of his own. Well, yeah, from Yu Jin-Ho's perspective, I did save his life and all. Wasn't it the most obvious thing in the world that you'd become really courteous and humble towards a person who saved your life? When looked at that way, his attitude made more sense. The reality of the situation was slightly different from that, though. Rumble. The dungeon shook around for a bit again before its tremors stopped. That tremor was the reminder that the gate would close in a little while. The tremors would progressively get worse as time went by, and just before the gate closed, it'd morph into a full-blown earthquake. Let's get out of here. Yes, Hying Nim. Jin-Woo began walking towards the entrance. Before they reached it, though, there was a sudden flash of light, and the rocks blocking up the entrance collapsed. Boom. Afterwards, Hwang Dong-seok and his goons rushed into the boss room. As soon as spotting the dead spider behind Jin-Woo, their expressions became dumbfounded. What the hell? It's really dead. Did those two hunt it? That spider must have been nothing much even with that big body and all. Well, if a rank D and a rank E managed to kill it, then, Hwang Hying, what should we do now? meownovel.com is updating your favorite novel. Hwang Dong-seok scratched his chin while gazing at Jin-Woo and Yu Jin-Ho. With the spider dead, the gate would soon close. It'd be too late to start mining the mana stones now. They hadn't even finished getting ready, yet the remaining time was now less than an hour. It was time for the plan B, so he loudly called out to Yu Jin-Ho. Yu Jin-Ho! Yu Jin-Ho flinched and took a step back. His face was full of nervous tension. An oily smile floated up on Hwang Dong-seok's face. I thought your gear looked real eye-catching, so we did a background check on you, and it turns out that you're a son of a real big shot. The son of the Yujin Constructions owner, Yu Mying-han, no less. So what? We'll give you a chance. I've got some stuff to discuss with your old man, you see. However, it'd get real troublesome for us if the matters of this place get out. So, if you wish to live, you better become our accomplice. An accomplice? Hwang Dong-seok pointed at Jin-Woo with his chin. Being on the receiving end of that disgusting stare, Jin-Woo's forehead creased for a second. Kill Seong Jin-Woo. What? Yu Jin-Ho freaked out, and Hwang Dong-seok chuckled as if he found that expression rather funny. The thing was, he used his phone to do an online search and found out that Yoo Jin-ho's father was the owner of the top construction company in the country. Seeing that, a sinister scheme formed in his head. He'd filmed the scene of Yoo Jin-ho killing Jin-Woo, and then under the pretext of keeping his mouth shut, blackmail Yoo Myung-han. The known wealth of Yoo Myung-han is supposedly around 10 trillion won, wasn't it? TL, almost $9 billion. He might be able to reel in several times more money than mining these monostones, if he played his cards right. You can read this novel at meonovel.com for better experience. That's the only way you'll leave this place alive. As long as you kill Jin-Woo with your own hands, we'll let you live. If not, we kill both of you. Hwang Dong-seok's eyes became very hostile right away. What are you hesitating for? No one will know what happens inside a dungeon anyway. Wait, could it be that you're scared of a rank E, even though you're a rank D? Yoo Jin-ho turned his head to his side. Jin-Woo shrugged his shoulders as his answer. He was implying that Yoo Jin-ho should do whatever he felt like. With a determined expression, Yoo Jin-ho unsheathed the sword on his hips. Finally, he made up his mind. A smile formed on Hwang Dong-seok's mouth. Unfortunately for him, his expectation was not met. Still holding that sword, Yoo Jin-ho stood alongside Jin-Woo. Oh, so, you wanna team up with that guy and fight us, is that right? Hwang Dong-seok muttered softly. A scion of a well-to-do family got lucky and killed a rank C boss, and it looked like his ego had become bloated somewhat as a result. Jo Jae Hwan whispered from the side. Hying, what should we do now? Hwang Dong-seok lowered his voice, so both Jin-Woo and Yoo Jin-ho wouldn't be able to hear him. For now, take care of Jin-Woo first. We gotta hold on to that potential money bag. Our losses today are pretty substantial after all. Okay, will do. Jo Jae-hwan's hands began emitting bright light next. Seeing this, Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed to a slit. In the end, they want to have a go. This would be his very first time fighting against other hunters. However, he wasn't planning to go easy on these beastards that have aimed for his life several times already. But then this happened. meonovel.com will be your favorite novel site. Tai ring. There was that mechanical beep again. An emergency quest has been generated. An emergency quest. Jin-Woo raised his head. He didn't even say anything about wanting to look at the contents. Yet the quest window spread out before his eyes without his consent. Now that was a first. Emergency quest. Kill all the enemies. There are life forms holding murderous intentions towards the player. Kill them all in order to secure your own safety. If you do not follow this instruction, a corresponding penalty will be given. The number of enemies left to kill, 8. The number of killed enemies, 0. Jin-Woo's eyes open wider. In order to complete the quest, Hwang Dong-seok and his teammates must all die. It was then, a beam of light flashed right before his eyes. The light beams left Jo Jae-hwan's hands and flew straight at Jin-Woo. Boom. Flung away by the explosion, Jin-Woo's figure flew at a frightening speed and slammed into the cave wall. Slam. A portion of the wall collapsed and fell on top of Jin-Woo. Tumble. Latest update on meonovel.com. Hying Nim? Yoo Jin-ho froze on the spot from surprise. Don't sweat over the dead guy. And why don't you come over here? Hwang Dong-seok beckoned with his fingers. Yoo Jin-ho stared at the spot where Jin-Woo was. Just like what Hwang Dong-seok had implied, Jin-Woo wasn't moving an inch as he remained buried under the debris. You murderers. Tears pooled around Yoo Jin-ho's eyes. Hwang Dong-seok and his Dong-sing simply giggled at the label of murderers thrown at their way. Well, that was the truth, to begin with anyway. Just how many died by their hands inside many other dungeons? While they were looking at Yoo Jin-ho and continued to smile, Jin-Woo was under the pile of rubble, doubting his own eyes at the moment. The contents of the quest were slowly changing. That was why. Emergency quest. Kill all the enemies. There are life forms holding murderous intentions towards the and at number. Kill them all in order to secure your own safety. If you do not follow this instruction $% $$% and $%, the number of enemies left to kill, 8. The number of killed enemies, 0. A few words suddenly became illegible, before changing their shapes. Emergency quest. Kill all the enemies. There are life forms holding murderous intentions towards you. Kill them all in order to secure your own safety. If you do not follow this instruction, your heart will cease functioning. The number of enemies left to kill, 8. The number of killed enemies, 0. MeowNovel.com is updating your favorite novel. What a clear-cut threat that was. If he didn't finish the quest as intended, it would kill him instead. Kill if I don't want to be killed. Is that it? The contents were pretty shocking, but Jin-Woo's fluster didn't remain for long. No, his flustered mind rapidly morphed into one of relief. Even he found it hard to believe, but that was the truth. There was this fear that always lingered in his mind, starting from the day these quests popped up in front of his eyes alongside stat values and such. What would happen to me if this mysterious phenomenon suddenly stopped? What if all these things only happened as a coincidence, and they could end at any given moment? Such fear always accompanied him. However, through this emergency quest, the truth became clear. Things happening to him were not a coincidence, nor were they some weird goodwill from someone. If the quest was generated by something holding some form of goodwill, then it should have just said overcome this danger, and not threaten him to kill him as a penalty. The system had a clear purpose. It was either make Seong Jin-Woo strong or need a strong Seong Jin-Woo. And, depending on the situation, me who could kill other hunters at the drop of a hat even. He could glean such intentions from the system now. Jin-Woo felt reassured by that revelation. What a relief that it was not a coincidence. That it definitely had a goal. You can read this novel at meownovel.com for better experience. Whenever he found himself in danger, he yearned to be stronger. He so dearly wished to stop living the life where it was no different from dangling precariously on the edge of a cliff. But, on that fateful day, during the most dangerous moments of his life, his opportunity came. The goal of this system and Jin-Woo's wishes lined up perfectly. The system is using me, and I'm using the system. That was all there was to it. As long as there was an end goal, a purpose, this phenomenon would never suddenly vanish from his eyes. Jin-Woo slowly got up from the rubble. HP 1360-2600. As expected of a magic spell shot by a rank C hunter, it was only a single hit. Yet his HP had almost halved. There was no more room left to take it easy now. Intense malice filled up Jin-Woo's eyes. He began walking towards Hwang Dong-seok. What the heck? Hwang Dong-seok and his goons had been surrounding the scared Yu Jin-ho, so they ended up discovering Jin-Woo rather belatedly. What's going on here? He's still alive, but Jio Hwan-hying looks like a dead fish, though. What an embarrassment this is. He's a measly ranky, you know. Hwang Dong-seok scratched his chin. Hey, Jio Hwan, why didn't you finish him properly the first time? Jio Hwan's face reddened somewhat. MeowNovel.com will be your favorite novel site. Yeah, I should've. But, this wasn't right. He really did pour his all with that shot. He had spent over a third of his overall magical energy. Yet how could this kid stand back up? Could the attack not connect properly? But then, there wouldn't have been such a loud explosion if that was the case. Lots of questions formed in his head, but there was no time to ask them, because Jin-Woo opened his mouth first. Since you're playing around with people's lives, the eyes of Hwang Dong-seok's group were now fixed to Jin-Woo. He came to a stop in front of them. Yu Jin-ho flinched in surprise, but the reactions of other hunters were rather subdued. Some of them even began smirking in derision. Jin-Woo spoke with a dry voice. You've all sufficiently resolved yourselves, right? Hwang Dong-seok let off a snort after hearing that. What the hell is this fool even saying? Hi Nim, let me handle this kid. A hunter with tiny little eyes approached Jin-Woo and placed his arms around the latter's neck. It looks like you mister hasn't really figured the situation out yet, but the thing is, the expression of the tiny eyes became weirder and weirder as he strengthened his arms. What the hell? Why can't I pull him down? Latest update on meownovel.com. He tried to perform a headlock with his physical strength, but no matter how hard he pulled, Jin-Woo's upper body showed no sign of budging. Wasn't this beastard supposed to be only a ranky? Cold sweat formed on the forehead of the tiny eyes. How could he be this strong? It happened then. Slice. The head of the tiny eyes fell to the ground. Thud. Jae-jun-tae. Hwang Dong-seok's eyes trembled like an earthquake. What the hell? That knife just when did he? Where did he get that? Hwang Dong-seok and his goons quickly took several steps back and yanked their weapons out. Jin-Woo's hand was already holding the poison fang of Kasaka. Blood dripped from the tip of the blade. Tai Ring. The number of enemies left to kill, 7. The number of killed enemies, 1. 7 left.